بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khairan everyone for joining workshop 2. Continue on from workshop 1 yesterday. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khairan for everyone, or to everyone for participating throughout the session yesterday. The chat will also be enabled again halfway throughout the session. And since post the session last night, alhamdulillah, we received, I think, must have been 30 to 40 messages and questions. So alhamdulillah, we've kept Mullah Abdullah very busy today with him responding to all the queries. And Mullah Abdullah has he just messaged me half an hour before the session and mentioned that he is going to be inviting on a special guest. So inshallah, today we have Mufti Umar joining us. He's a Mufti and a solicitor who specializes in will writing and both post-death legalities, inshallah. So he is going to be running through a case study. Thereafter, Mullah Abdullah will be continuing on with the session, inshallah. So I will now pass it on to Mufti Umar.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. جزاكم الله خير Moulana for the kind introduction, and Moulana Abdullah Sahab for giving me an opportunity to just share some tips and guidance really on Sharia wills and estate planning. Just to clarify on one point, that I'm not a qualified solicitor at the moment. I'm a trainee solicitor. Inshallah, I'll be qualifying within the next 12 months. So just make dua for that it goes smooth and well. I just wanted to really pick up from where Moulana Abdullah Sahab left off really yesterday.
Mullah, sorry to interrupt
Sorry.
you for 1 second. Could you just, I don't know if you can come a bit closer to the
Yeah.
computer. The voice is coming through, but it's just not as loud as maybe we'd like for it to be. So maybe you might have to raise your voice a little. Sorry about that one.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Jazakallah khair.
Can you hear me now? Is
Yeah,
that clear?
that's fine. Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. Jazakallah khair.
Okay. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to start with illustrating the differences between a basic will and a trust-based will. Normally, what we find generally across many law firms is that they offer the basic will, but they are reluctant quite often on drafting a trust-based will. So we'll use this case study to understand the difference between the two, and also the inheritance tax implications as well. So we have a very basic example here where we have a husband and wife. We're going to assume for the purposes of this scenario that they are legally married and they have one son. Next slide. So what happens, obviously this is a real case study. This isn't just something that's made up. So this person or this family, they went to a non-specialist solicitor. They were looking for a Sharia compliant will. And the two key points I think here are, number one, that they had a family home, which was worth £800,000. And an issue which they hadn't realized when drafting the will was it was only in the husband's sole name. Now, just before we move on, I just want to elaborate on the nil rate band and the residency nil rate bands. These are two tax exemptions that you have. So anybody who has assets in the UK, doesn't matter where they could live anywhere across the world, but they have assets in the UK, they are entitled to what we call a nil rate band, which is £325,000, which essentially means that up until that amount, you don't pay any tax, inheritance tax, that is. In addition to that, if you are legally married, and just to reiterate the point from yesterday, that legally married means you don't have to have a civil marriage in this country. So if you are legally married in any other country, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, anywhere where it's recognized in that country, as long as you have the documentation, that marriage will be recognized here. So being legally married. So if you are legally married, you own a family home and you have children, then you are entitled to another exemption, which is worth £175,000, which is called the residency nil rate band, and that is specifically for any family home that you are passing on to either your spouse or your children or their descendants. So essentially, each person in this family, if we have a look, they are entitled to £1 million. So £500,000 for the husband, £500,000 for the wife. But we don't see that at the moment. What we will see if we continue on to the next slide. When the will, so what happened was they created a basic will. Now, in a basic will, what you've got to understand is when we talk about the spousal exemption is only going to be on 1/8. For the simple reason is that they elected for a Sharia-based will. So if you're legally married and any assets are moving between spouses, that is 100% tax free, 100% IHT free. It doesn't matter if it's £10 or £100 million. Everything is tax free if it's moving between husband and wife, wife and husband. So that's the first benefit that they lost. What does that mean? The implication of that is if the wife is getting 1/8, which is £100,000, that is totally exempt from IHT. So we understand that. Then as I just explained now, the £500,000 that the husband has. The question is, why is it only his exemption applying and not the wife's? Well, the house is only in his name. Again, this is another point that it's important to actually split the tenancy of any house that you own between husband and wife so that you can take advantage of the tax exemptions for both individuals. Now here, what we have is the family home is only in the husband's name, and we're assuming he's passed away. So he's forced to now use his nil rate band and his residency nil rate band, which is £500,000, to pass on the rest of the estate. But that's still not enough. He's only used £500,000 plus £100,000 for the wife, which is £600,000. That leaves £200,000, which cannot be covered by any exemptions now. So that is going to be taxed at 40%, which is £80,000 to pay on day one, which means, like I said, they only had the family home as the asset. There's so many families, as Moulana Abdullah said yesterday, that are, property rich, but not cash rich. So they would be forced to sell the house to liquidate the asset in order to pay the £80,000. Because remember, you've got a time limit. Normally, it's about 6 months to pay HMRC. You can negotiate with them and arrange something with them, but they're rather reluctant on that, generally speaking, unless it's a massive estate. Where there's millions at stake, then they might, reconsider. But generally speaking, you only have 6 months. So can you imagine a family only has a family home? They have no cash available to give, unless, of course, they borrow from family. That's another matter. But they themselves don't have the cash at hand. Nobody has £80,000 just lying around. Generally speaking, maybe they do, but it might be difficult for a certain number of families. So this is the problem. Now, if we compare this to a trust-based will, if you go to the next slide, so I've explained all of this essentially. So a trust-based will, the way it works is the husband and the wife would make wills in mirror terms. So what the husband, both of them would say is that on my death, my entire estate should go to my wife. And remember, this is only for tax purposes. This is not Sharia distribution at this moment in time. It's only for tax purposes, because we've got two parallels essentially. When we're drafting trust wills and we're trying to make them, well, when we make them Sharia compliant, we have to make sure we ensure that we address the taxation, especially for larger estates with larger amounts where, we've got clients worth 10, 15, 20 million pounds. So we have to make it tax efficient, which you only get in a trust-based will. But then we also have a method where we make sure it's Sharia compliant, where where it's Muslims and they elect for that. So in a trust-based will, just to start again, the husband, let's say the husband passed away, both him and his wife have trust wills, but ignore the wife's will just for now. Let's focus on the husband. He has a trust-based will. On his trust-based will, he has trustees. Okay, a trust-based will needs three things: trustees, a trust fund, which is just legal jargon for your estate, formal term, and beneficiaries. What he will do, what the husband will have done in his lifetime, he will have chosen trustees, and they will enforce his wishes, which will be that he wants a distribution according to Sharia. So in the first instance, for tax purposes, everything goes to the wife, and she owns that, but she knows she is one of 2, 3, or 4 trustees. Remember that. And we always advise that when you elect trustees, as Moli Abdullah was saying yesterday, that the executive trustees are very, very important people. They're very powerful in the first instance. They make big decisions, key decisions. So if you have somebody independent of the family, so for instance, if in this case, the husband elected his wife to be a trustee, maybe his son is a minor, and then he chose a third party, like Moulana said, you could choose your local Imam, a solicitor, and any professional, anybody. Ideally, we advise normally that trustees should be financially secure themselves. They should understand the trustee's role, and they should also understand the family dynamics. Now, independent trustee may not understand the family dynamics, but at least they may be directed by the other trustees to understand how everything works. So the trustees would then look at what we call the letter of wishes, which Moulana mentioned yesterday as well, which sits alongside the trust will. And in the letter of wishes, the husband will have said, these are my family, this is what the Sharia says, I want everything to be distributed according to Sharia. Now, what happens at that point is that it's not like the next day everything's distributed out. Especially with larger estates, the wife will be advised to go to solicitors, to tax advisors, and just seek some tax advice on how to best distribute those shares in a most tax efficient manner. So we get the best of both in a trust-based will. You get the 100% spousal exemption on the first step anyway, because you're legally married and you have a trust-based will. And then, of course, when you have the letter of wishes, we get the third part on those bullet points where it's completely Sharia compliant as well. Obviously, is there taxation to pay later on? When the shares are distributed, where the assets are allocated and distributed. Again, the tax advisors would be able to tell you more based on your personal circumstances. So that's that. Is there another slide after this? I think that's. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on a few points of some of the benefits of trust-based wills as opposed to basic wills. So remember, in a basic will, okay, on day one on a basic will, the inheritors become the owners of the assets that are allocated to them. So if a person owns £10 million and he's done a Sharia will basic, and on day one he's given his son 2.5 million, okay, there is nothing stopping him from completely spending that money however he wants, wherever he wants, etc. No restraints, nothing at all. Now, what we normally tend to find in families is that there's various issues that might be occurring at the same time. We had a client where he received he was going through bankruptcy. So he had a business, he was going through bankruptcy, and he received outright an entire home. Now, the courts, when they were made aware of this, obviously by the other party, they said that the house will need to be part of the bankruptcy proceedings. And essentially, by the end of the court case, he lost the entire house. That's how much debt he had, etc. Now, obviously, we're not talking about permissibility, legalities, and all of that, but I'm just giving an example of where if a house which is allocated to you in a trust-based will, and you are going through divorce, bankruptcy, whatever it might be, maybe the person is going through mental health issues, maybe they have an addiction and they're going through rehab, and they can't be trusted at this moment in time with money. The trustees can elect to stop that person receiving that money straight away. It's not that they won't receive it at all. It is theirs, and they understand that in terms of Sharia. But it just gives them some time to think about how they can, pass on all of those assets, whatever it may be, to that person in a way that they don't squander and go through those assets in a way that it negatively impacts their life as well. So these are just some of the examples. Like so many of our community, we find that they're on universal credit, or they might be in receipt of disability benefits, etc. The moment HMRC finds out that you have a windfall and you've received £250,000, £500,000, £1 million, or you've received a house, they can cut your benefits overnight. Now, if it's in a trust-based will, you can say that I don't own those assets. Those assets are owned by the trust. They are controlled by the trustees. I'm just one of many beneficiaries named on those trusts. Remember, this is all for taxation purposes. So essentially, the local government, they can excuse and set aside that trust when they are concluding on your means testing benefits. I think that covers pretty much everything that I wanted to cover on. Jazakallah khair for allowing me to participate.
Jazakumullah khairan, Mufti Umar, for blessing us with your knowledge and enlightening us with that very important case study. If anyone does have any questions for Mufti Umar, on the screen are Mufti Umar's contact details and email, so feel free to send him a message directly. Alternatively, if you can't get the contact details, message us on our DM, inshallah, we'll get back to you, inshallah. Now we'll pass it over to Moulana Abdullah, mashallah.
Right, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Okay, we have 45 minutes, and what we're going to do is let's go back to that will template we were working with yesterday. And you see near the end, there's a few technical things I've written about jury estate, things like that. All this means is residue is whatever is left over. So after you've paid funeral expenses, after you've done kafan, ghusl, all those things, there is money left over. That is what you call the residuary estate after the initial costs have been covered. That's all it is, right? So I've written with that difficult slide, I've gotten in English now, which is basically after my funeral expenses, my debts, etc. That is the residue, the left over. When it is left over, this is what will be shared. This is where donations will come from. This is where the inheritors will get their stuff from. And then we have trusts of residue. Now, in trusts of residue, this basically, in here, we'll basically declare and say, guys, I want my inheritors to be able to share my wealth in an Islamic way. This is generic. You could make it specific, and you could say, I want my dad to get this Islamic amount, or this much according to Islam, my mother this much according to Islam, my daughter this much according to Islam. The only issue with that is, I understand why people do that, and I get it. The only issue with that is every time somebody dies from your inheritors, you'll have to rewrite your will. You basically have to keep updating it, because obviously those shares will become different. If my son dies, then I don't know, other people will have a bigger share of the pot, basically. If I keep it generic, the benefit is even if somebody passes away, then the benefit of that naturally is, as long as the ruling is share it Islamically. And if you want to be specific and say, go to your local Imam, or go to, I don't know, Mufti Umar, and Mufti Umar is going to sort it out, somebody you trust, you can do that. Okay. Now, then you have standard provisions. This is really technical. What basically this says is, it gives permission to the people who are executing your will, right? So what it says is, guys, if you don't need some time, take some time. If you're going to invest that money according to my wishes and use Islamic principles, etc., etc. For Muslims, this is really, really helpful, because you give your trustees a bit of leeway, a bit of guidance as to how to deal with that money. And in there, I've added a clause about don't insure this money. So some people might insure and say, no, actually, I don't want you to insure the investment. I want you to just, because that's un-Islamic, obviously, let it run as it is. Okay. Now, signatures are really important, because obviously they prove who it is. I said yesterday, digital signatures are not acceptable. You have to do a handwritten signature, even though the whole will is digital, great, but the actual signatures have to be handwritten. The witnesses and the executor, the witnesses and the testator, meaning me, I am the testator, I am writing the will, and my two witnesses have to sign it at the same time. Not literally the same time, within the same majlis, the same gathering. What I can't do is, I can't write the will and then next day find my brother and say, sign it for me, please. If they find out that you've done it like that, they will basically say that that's not a valid witness. He didn't witness that will being written. So even Islamically, a witness has to be within that majlis. Okay. And I've written a little point here. Obviously, life and death is in Allah Ta'ala's hands. Anybody can die at any time. But we know generally the rule of life is the older you are, the closer you are to death. So ideally, like if your witness is 75 years old and you're 30, you can probably understand why that's probably not the brightest idea in the world. Although if your witness dies, nothing actually changes. The will is still fine. Somebody asked that question yesterday. What if my witness dies? If your witness dies, it's still fine. But if you know there's going to be fights about the contents of the will, then you might want to just rewrite it and get new witnesses. But that depends on your family dynamic. Mufti Umar says something really important about the executorship. Make executors people who understand family dynamics, who know. And when I started being an executor a few weeks ago, I kind of made peace in my head that this is a lose-lose situation. People will get upset because people obviously have their own reasons, their own matlabs, their own objectives. People will get upset, and you kind of have to accept that there are family dynamics you have to deal with. Witnesses pass away, not a problem. But if you know there are going to be fights, people are going to contest it. They're going to call the witnesses and say, did he actually write this? Then you might have motivation to say, guys, okay, let me rewrite it, and not rewrite it, just reprint it and re-sign it, because I need the witness to be alive. Can it be? This is quite technical. Can it be challenged Islamically? It can't. You can go to a mufti and say, I'm challenging this will, unless that will is proper and Islamic. The mufti will say, you know what, you have to go according to the will. If there's something you want to do with the courts, then you know what, if that wouldn't be permissible, but fine, people are able to do that. This is for reference. You can read it later. So this is a summary of the will. It ensures your wishes are executed, your family don't fall into dispute, pay for funeral costs, clear your debts, fulfill the will. The 1/3 includes your fidya. The 1/3, maximum 1/3, by the way, includes your fidya. What else? Your gifts to non-inheritors, your charitable donations, all these things in the 1/3. The 2/3, minimum 2/3, I say, minimum 2/3 is going to be for your family, and you have no say about that. Even if your Islamic will or your will says that, and your Muslim family say no, but Islamically I should get more, then yeah, Islamically they should get more. And if it does so happen that your dad gets less than his share and your mum gets more than her share, and your dad is upset, for example, your son is upset and your daughter is happy, etc., and they were to challenge it, then you are answerable to Allah Ta'ala for this dhulm, for this oppression. So you have to be very careful about this. Store your will safely, make copies of it. Each copy needs to be hand signed. Keep it by a solicitor, keep one in your pocket. I've got one in my laptop bag that I take everywhere with me, and I've given one to each of my witnesses. I said, guys, you lot keep a will each as well. So I've got 3 wills, and they are in safe hands, alhamdulillah. If you want to update your will, just add things to it. You can add things to it. It's called a codicil to the will. You can make a new will, which is probably the easier thing to do, to be honest. Right. Oh yeah, make sure your executor knows where your will is, by the way. There's no point having an executor and they don't know where your will is. That would be a bit funny. Changing a will, I'm not going to go into detail with this here. It is a bit technical. But can you change your shares? Let's say parents have written something un-Islamic in it, and you want to change the shares to make it Islamic. If everybody on there agrees for that to happen, then there are processes that are available that you can do. It's called a deed of variation, but this is a bit technical. Again, this is here for reference. And I've made a disclaimer before, and I've written it as a disclaimer. This document, like the notes, the PowerPoint, is not legally binding, which means do go and speak to a solicitor after, do go and check it out with a mufti, etc. after. There will be mistakes. I'm not free of mistakes as much as I might claim to be, but there will be mistakes on here. There might be, misrepresentations of the law, etc. Please get it double checked, right? I'm not perfect, and it's a good thing that none of you are either, right? Session 2. This is a juicy part.
Just to jump in, there's a question that's just come in, and I think it's a question that many people ask. So not to throw you off the ball a little, but there's a question that says, why is it minimum of 2/3 go to the inheritors? Can they get a share from the remaining 1/3 too? So do you want to just quickly explain that?
Well, that's why it's minimum 2/3, right? By minimum 2/3, I'm going to go up to a hadith. I've made notes of a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam here. Of Sayyidina Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiyallahu anhu. He was on his deathbed, and he wanted to give 2/3 of his wealth in sadaqah? Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said, no. And he said, okay, let me give half of my wealth in sadaqah, therefore leave half for my family. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, no. And he said, okay, let me give 1/3 of my wealth in sadaqah. They love the akhirat so much, right? They look forward to it. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said, fine, الثلث والثلث كثير. Fine, give 1/3 in sadaqah, but that is your absolute maximum. It's better that you leave your inheritors with more money. You leave them wealthy, independent. This is better for them than they go out and they beg other people for money. So the 2/3, so this is, if your donations and everything only add up to 10% of your estate, then 90% will be shared with your family. But it's a minimum 2/3 is shared with your family. Really, it should be more than 2/3 that you leave behind for your family. Okay, does that answer the question? And the reason for it is that hadith I just mentioned. Right. Now, I'm going to jump to another document. Please open this document. This document is called the Assets and Liabilities Identifier. So it's in that same OneDrive folder, the core folder. You'll see one of the folders, subfolders is called Assets Identifier. Go into there and you will know what I am talking about. And I'm going to try to find mine here. Give me a second. There I am. Right. What's happened here?
So just to confirm one last, so it's the first folder, Assets Liability Identifier, and it's the second document, the presentation, correct? Or is that the template?
It's a
The Excel
template. It's an
template.
Excel document.
The Excel document. So just so that everyone's clear, so if you open up the OneDrive, I'll share the link again in the group. If you click on the first folder, Assets Liabilities Identifier, and it's the first file, Assets Liabilities template. Someone's mentioned that the link does not seem to be working. It should be working. I'm going to forward it onto the group now.
It works. It works for me fine, alhamdulillah. And I've just signed in on a I've just clicked the link without signing into Hotmail and it's still working. So really it should be working. And yesterday it worked for most people as well. What we're going to do is I'm going to crack on, and this is really like the will template was quite self-explanatory in the sense that all the writing was already there. This is also going to be quite easy to follow, inshallah. What I'm going to do is, while I've got that document open, I'm going to have open the PowerPoint slides on my other laptop. This Molisab rolls with 2 laptops, you see. Moulana Musa said he's going to pay for a 3rd one. So I wait for that day.
We need to pay for your Wi-Fi first, Moulana, and then we can look at our device, inshallah. But continue.
Right, let's go. This is the Assets and Liabilities Identifier. If you've noticed something in the will template we went through yesterday and we finished today, there's no details of finances in there. It doesn't say how much money I have in the bank. It doesn't say the gold I own. It doesn't say the debts I have. That is all in this document. This document is so important because this is what causes fights. This is why families stop talking to each other, because somebody is saying, but Papa promised me the house in my lifetime, and there's no record of it anywhere. Nobody's mentioned it. So this document, it's got a big title, Assets and Liabilities Identifier. What it basically is, right, I need someone to undo that red mark across the screen. That is not good. Can you see it, Musa, or is it just me? Somebody's annotating. Good job. Right. This document is simply what I own and what I owe. That's what this document is. Now, the first look at the bottom, there's tabs here. There's a couple of red ones, a yellow one at the end. The first one is summary. Do not touch this. This is automated formulae. I've made life so easy for you, right? You don't even have to do the calculations yourself. That will all happen automatically. So if you want to edit it right now, download the workbook, meaning this Excel document, download it, open it, and start working on it. And you'll see as you start filling up the other tabs, this first tab will automatically update. Pre-death, this is just empty because I'm just saying that these are the pre-death things to do. Now, assets, bang. Assets, what I own. I've written different types of assets here. I'm just really good about this is, I should do edit workbook really, innit? Nah. Now, if I edit workbook, look, property. I have done a drop-down menu for you. So people who don't know where to start, you don't need to worry about where to start because there's property there. If you have stocks, then you put stocks in there. There's crypto as an option. There's cash an option. The cash as an option. There's ISAs as an option. The difference between an ISA and investments are ISAs are very specific, tax exempt investments you make. Investments generally could be something different. Like I've invested in my friend's business, for example. That's not an ISA. Cash, pensions, cryptocurrency. And look, the brilliant thing about this is insert one row above. I've got 2 pensions. So I'm going to write pensions again. And I'm going to write the value as 3,000 and 2,000. I own 100% of it. My wife doesn't share this. And this formula, if I just drag this down, will automatically say, and I also have notes for you in gray here. Look how amazing that is. So my property ownership is 50% because it's owned with the wife. So if my property is worth £300,000, guess what? My value is 150. It does it automatically. And in my notes, I'm going to shared with wife. You can make all this black if you want later. I've just put it in gray. So, you know that they are just, I guess, notes for you to follow. If you have stocks, write down which company it's with. Write down if you want which fund it's with. If you're keeping in the same fund forever, obviously change your funds. Don't bother doing that. Write down your passwords, etc. If you want. Write down your account number. Write down all those things. Obviously, it's sensitive information. You're never going to share this with anybody, right? Only people you absolutely trust. You're going to write your cash. I've got 20,000 under my mattress. I've got 5,000 under my cereal box, and I've got 4,000 in that bin that I never use in the living room. Okay, so you're going to write all of this down so people know where your money is. There was a point made yesterday, and I want to clarify this. When it comes to taking ownership of something, we have a habit, especially like in the subcontinent, Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, we have this really bad habit of saying we've gifted something to somebody, but Islamically, that won't count as a gift. The example I'm going to give you is, I've got 2 sons, right? One of them is an alim, the other one is not. He's a lawyer, mashallah, he's got a very, very healthy salary. The other one is an imam, he's earning 10,000-15,000 pounds a year. So I say to myself, you know what? My house, in my lifetime, I've put it on my imam son's name because he doesn't have the money to buy a house. So legally, the land registry will have his name on it. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, I've put on his name. I've told everyone, I've told my other son, it's on, it's on Abdullah's name. He's the imam, etc. But then Abdullah then says, you know what, my son, he says, Baba, I want to build an extension. And I, the original owner of the property, say, no, you can't. It's still my house. Or I live in the house and I live in it as the dad and I live in it for free. I don't pay any rent, etc. And that's not, I haven't taken approval from my son for that. If my son does not have full haqq of tasarruf, meaning if he does not have full ownership of that property in that he can do what he wants with it, it's not fully his. If my son, if he truly owned it, could turn around tomorrow and say, Papa, I'm selling the house. And if I've truly given it to him Islamically, he can sell the house. I can't do anything about it. Yeah, I can disapprove. I can say, beta, please don't, etc. But I can't physically stop him. So sometimes we gift things to people. We think we've gifted it to people. And in reality, Islamically, it's not a gift. I'm still the owner Islamically because I haven't given them the full right of ownership inside that property. He's not even out changing the carpet without asking me. Not as a dad, but because he thinks it's still Baba's house. So therefore, he can't even change the carpet inside the house. So we have to be really, really careful that when we talk about ownership, a person is actually the Islamic owner of something. It's really, really important. Okay, I'm just going to cut off this extra pensions thing so it doesn't mess it up for anyone else who's using it. But here we go. There's household items I've put here as well. Who owns a washing machine in your house? You could say it's owned, like the property is, like each of these things is 50-50. Fine, if that's how you want to do it, Like what I've done for myself is anything that I use, like my tools, like DIY tools, etc. All my devices, they're mine. Everything else in the house I've said are my wives. So I've made it really easy for people. Because if you don't clarify this, then somebody might say, my son might come and say, oh, I really like dad's fridge freezer. And he's like, but it's not your dad's, it's mine. No, but I think it's dad's and you've already got another one. I want to take this one. So you just create issues for no, for no reason. If you think I'm being pedantic, then you need to come and live with me for a bit, because I'll tell you, I'll show you the kind of cases I have to deal with. Bank accounts, you might have loads of bank accounts. If you have a Monzo and a Starling because you go abroad and you only update it, you only put money in it once a year, it doesn't matter, write it in, write down which bank it is, write down what the account number is, what the sort code is, write these details down, because this is the most important document the executive will be using for your finances. What otherwise will happen is your executive is going from bank to say, okay, Abdullah Patel of this address passed away. Do you have anything? Does he have a bank account with you? And then you got to go into their home and you got to look like, where did he keep all his letters? Let me see. There is a letter from Lloyd's. Is there a letter from NatWest? And it's just headache. If you write it here, that look, I've got £3,000, not 30,000. I wish. And in here I write the Lloyd's details. I'm the executor. I look at it and I'm like, this is amazing. He's got a Lloyd's account, a NatWest account, a Starling account, a Monzo account. Brilliant. All the data is here for me to see. Okay, so we've got bank accounts. The loans to others is also your money. I've lended Moulana Musa £20,000 for his house, and nobody knows about it except me and him. What you should do is you should write these things down, and you should have witnesses. I gave Moulana Musa on August of 2020. I gave him £20,000. He said he will repay me by August 2025. 5-year lease, like 5-year loan, and £4,000 a year. And it's still 2024, for example. So Moulana Musa still owes me £4,000. If I write it here, people know, right? Because not everyone is as honest as Moulana Musa might come to my family and say, guys, I owe your dad £5,000. But not everyone is that honest, unfortunately. Household items, personal items, your mobiles, etc. Who owns what? Loyalty points. This is just for family's sake. This doesn't have a cash value, but I collect Amex points, for example, and Avios points, and they can get really, really valuable. So if your family want to make sure they move those points over, then you can do that. Startup investments, people like IFG and Wahid now allow you to make venture capital investments. So a startup company putting 5,000 into there, and they say after 5 years, it could become 20,000, it could become 1,000. So we've also got a point in there. There's gold in there, silver in there. Life insurance, we know, is haram, but some people have life insurance policies, and that is money that obviously will be added to the estate, which means that's why I've put it in there, not because it's permissible to have life insurance, but because people do unfortunately have it, and it is part of the estate. What should you do as somebody who now gets that life insurance? All that should go in sadaqah, right? That money, you shouldn't be comfortable keeping that money, because that money was never permissible. The amount that was invested in it, so my dad over 10 years paid 20,000 into it, then that money, the initial money, the capital he put in, you can take for yourself. Anything extra, the insurance payments, you shouldn't take that. Okay, that's where we are. This is assets, right? And you can just add as many rows as you want to it, and it will auto calculate. So I'm just going to put in random values here, right? Because I want to show you how it auto calculates. Just literally random values, and I'm going to show you at the end how it calculates.
Well,
now,
can I just quickly jump in?
Go
Because I know you're a host or you're a presenter that's adaptable. They may throw other people off. So there's a few questions. So you might see in the chat. So first question is does Islamic law require or encourage a person to disclose the contents of their will to their children or family during their lifetime?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. There's no Shari'i ruling to say you must show your children what's in your will, right? But is it common sense to? Somebody might argue yes, somebody might say no, they're going to start fighting from when I'm alive. You get it? Like, again, it's about family dynamics. If somebody's going to fight while they're alive, then just, they'll find out after I die, for example. But other people, if you have an open relationship and you say, look, beta, this is where I want money to go, and this I've put it in my will, there's nothing wrong with it. But Islamic, you don't have to tell someone what's inside your will before you die. Your executors obviously need to know where it is, etc., to have access to it.
Moulana Ibrahim has mentioned, he's asked if he can just jump in. So Moulana Ibrahim is the head of Islamic Academy of Coventry. So I have asked him to unmute him. He might have more information on that one. If he doesn't, we can just carry on. I've asked him to unmute. I think his mic's on. So Moulana, do you want to just quickly give a answer to that as well, just to supplement what Moulana Abdullah has mentioned?
Yeah, I just meant answering in the actual chat, but if you want me to quickly say a couple
No, that's fine. We can mute you again. I thought you meant
But I think just to lead on what Moulana Abdullah said, it depends on the dynamic. If you've got a kid who's sensible and they're your executor, then it obviously makes sense for you to inform them about the contents of your will, your finances. Me personally, my kids know everything, right? However, if you've got one kid who's, how could you say, maybe not on the straight path, might possibly not do things or do things with your wealth you don't want them to, then
Yeah.
family dynamic. But there's no Shari'i reason, like Moulana Abdullah said, for you to disclose that information to them.
Jazakallah khair, Moulana, for that. And just to have a quick scan of the other questions. What if parents have put the house in your name, but as you said, it doesn't really belong to you? How do you go about writing the will as it's not Islamically yours?
You don't add it to your ownership. In your assets identifier, what you can write is make a note in it and say, this is in my legal, like it's got my legal name on it, but it does not belong to me. It still belongs to mum or dad. That's what you do. Okay, it's not yours. And in fact, I would have a conversation with my parents and say, guys, if you're not going to give me ownership of it, just keep it, man. And this is for tax purposes, and there's all those other reasons why you might put something in somebody else's name. But it's a big mistake we make. I would just say, just in your assets identifier, just make a note of it and say, I know it's in my name, but it's not really mine. It still belongs to dad. Now that's how I would deal with it if I was in that situation.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair, Moulana, for that. I think just to supplement that, I think a lot of our, some parents like to be a bit ambiguous with what's in the will, with what's not in the will. So I think open communication is needed. So there are a few other questions, but what I'll do is I'll just pause on the questions for now. If you continue with your presentation, and if you have time at the end, you can answer the questions. If not, you can answer it later, inshallah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, now we're on the bills. Look at the next tab after assets. It's bills. These are bills that this person has been paying. So I've tried to include loads of things in there. There are things I've missed out. So I've even put things in like TV licenses, charity subscriptions, entertainment subscriptions. If you have Netflix, Prime, YouTube Premium, write it in there. Why? Because it's going to have to be cancelled, right? I guess the shortcut to it is call the bank, stop the card payments going out, and everything gets cut. But if you have multiple bank accounts and you don't know, okay, Netflix is coming from his Monzo account and his YouTube is coming from his Lloyd's account, and then you have just a big headache. So if you know the account details, etc., you can just cancel it directly with those companies. Make your executor's life easier. Don't make them, I call it discovery, don't make them run around trying to find statements, trying to find things in your emails. It just makes a big headache for them. So write down as much detail as you can. Charity subscriptions, this is what this basically means is if you give £5 a month to Cage or you give £5 a month to Darlum Berry, etc., then make a note of that as well, because obviously that's going to have to be cancelled at some point. But again, if you were to freeze your bank account, they would freeze everything, but then you need to make sure then your bank account details are all there. So all this needs to be married together, have all this information put together. Cancel your car insurance, cancel home insurance, etc. Oh, no, actually, home insurance you have to keep. You have to keep the home insurance because home insurance is just to protect yourself, is to protect the other residents inside the house, and also it protects your neighbors really importantly if there was a big fire, etc. What else? So these are bills that you pay monthly. You could put other bills in there as well, yearly bills. I put mortgage payment in there as well. Hopefully you've got HPPs, halal purchase plans, and none of you have mortgages, but I know people maybe for first house might have a mortgage. If that's the case, write it down. Now with mortgages, something to understand is if you call your mortgage provider and you say, my dad passed away, he had a mortgage with you, I've got documentation of it, this is his account number, they will say, we're going to put the mortgage on a hold for 12 months. You need to understand this, right? Please listen carefully to this if you have a mortgage or you are executor of somebody who has a mortgage. For 12 months, they will freeze that mortgage. They won't take the monthly payment for the mortgage. What they will do is they will continue adding on a daily interest rate. That daily interest rate could be £3-4 a day. Now, Add that up over the year, that's £1,500. That has just been added as interest, just pure interest, even though they're not taking the monthly mortgage payments. The 12 months they give you is 12 months to deal with your mortgage, with that property. What you can't do is, you can't just say, I'm putting this house in my dad's name, because there's a mortgage, there's a liability with that house. So what you will do is, the mortgage company will say, okay, I need that money within 12 months. Either you sell the house, and then the liability part of that mortgage, what is owed to the company, let's say the house is worth £150,000, you've paid 75, there's 75 left. We need the remainder of the mortgage, 75,000, paid off within 12 months. So you can, if you got the cash lying around, you can borrow it from people, bless, pay the mortgage company, and that house is yours, right? And then you can do what you want with it. If you don't, if like I said yesterday, you might be property rich and cash poor. If you're cash poor, you might say, you know what, I don't have the money for that. What they'll say to you then is, okay, then sell off your house, liquidate that asset. You need to liquidate that asset because this mortgage has to be paid. If I, as the son, say, but I want to live in my dad's house, you then have to call the bank and say, I want to put a new mortgage on this house. And that is a whole new discussion. That is not to do with inheritance. That is a whole new discussion to be had. You will need to speak to your mortgage providers, because I've spoken to 2 mortgage providers in the last few days in a situation like this, and the way they deal with it is slightly different. That's not what we're going to deal with today, and I don't have the answers to all those questions that you probably have based on the mortgage. But this 12-month thing is important to know, that that mortgage needs to be paid off within 12 months. Okay. Liabilities, which basically mean debts. Which debts do you have? I have debts to human beings. So I've made a note of it. I owe my friend Moulana Musa £2,000 that he lent me for my car. So I've made a note, owed to Moulana Musa. Add more details in it. Moulana Musa. How many? There's Moulana Musa. There's 1,000 in England. Moulana Musa Desai from Preston. This is his phone number. Contact him. Ideally, this is also his address. Brilliant. Get contact details as well. Credit cards. You have multiple credit cards. Make a note of all those credit card numbers, account numbers, etc. So we can call the credit card companies and we can say, look, they've passed away. Give us their final bill, basically. When it comes to mortgage, you can put mortgages here if you want. In liabilities, trust kept for others. This isn't a debt. This is in terms of trust. Somebody goes on holiday and they've left Moulana Musa £5,000 worth of gold because, I don't know, his uncle is going on holiday, for example. Now Moulana Musa passes away and his wife finds £5,000 worth of gold. Oh, Moulana Musa, he had £5,000 worth of gold. But if he's written in here that actually it's not a debt, it's just a trust I kept because they were going abroad, didn't want to keep it in an empty house, make a note of that here. Okay. Assets, bills, liabilities. I've tried to make it as comprehensive as I can and added as much detail as I can. So you should not fear, oh, where do I start? Where do I start? Inshallah, this should help. Now we are on to the 1/3 post. So this is pre-death. This is what you owned pre-death, right? Post-death, what this means is after I die, with my estate, the money I leave behind, the wealth I leave behind, the properties I leave behind, the gold, etc. I leave behind, where does that go? This voluntary execution, post-death legal fees are now not £3,000, £300 plus, I'm just going to edit this, plus £1.50 for every printout. So if you ask for 5 printouts of the grant of probate, which gives you permission as the executor to start dealing with their wealth, you pay £1.50 for every copy. So that £300 could become £309, but base rate £300 for the grant of probate. This, what somebody asked a really good question yesterday is, how should we pay for this? The easiest way, this is just my advice, right? You can go against it and other people might have different opinions, which is fine. The way I would deal with this is, as an executor, I would just pay the money, the £300, obviously keeping in mind family dynamics. If it's a really difficult family, maybe I won't. But if I know I'll get that money back, I'll pay for it myself, the £300. All the costs that I incur, whatever cost there might be, I'll keep a little tab of them, a little list, a receipt list as well. And at the end, once we get to the stage where we're dealing with the inheritance, I'll say, guys, I paid £400, for the probate cost and etc. etc. Can you give me that? So that's a debt owed by the estate. Then they will pay you the £400 before it goes through the inheritance, before it gets shared with the inheritors. Salah fidya, this all comes from the 1/3 Sawm fidya. If somebody does not write it in their will as the inheritors, you can guess on their behalf and sacrifice your inheritance, fine, but you don't have to. Okay. If I miss a salah, I should write it inside my will if it's not made up. This isn't for like the 1 or 2 you miss, because those inshallah you make up. This is for like if I've got 10 years worth of qaza salah when I was between 15 and 25 and I didn't pray, I was at uni and I was young. You know, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. But if I don't write it in my will, my inheritors don't have to pay it. Simple as zakat unpaid, qurbani unpaid. Then you can give your sadaqah as well. So I've written names of places that I'd love for you to donate to. You can change it. Cage, very close to my heart, Friends of Aqsa, etc. Al-Ashraf Primary School and Secondary School in Gloucester. This is my Indian gam. If anybody wants to donate towards, my dad would be really proud of me right now for plugging the Indian village. But if you want to donate anywhere, then you can write it in here. This is why I want my donations to go. And then look at the data tab. It's so amazing. It's automatically updated. Let me just like add some bills in as well. Just to, and look, it's automatically updated. Assets 18,000, bills 6,000, no liabilities. It's 300 there. And then guess what? If I go back to the summary, look at that. Brilliant. My voluntary execution is only £300 because I'm a stingy guy. I don't give anything in charity. So it's only the cost of probate that I'm paying for. That's only 4.29%. Brilliant. 95% goes to my family. And I've even got a pie chart here for all of you who love visuals.
Moulana, just to jump in, someone just asked a good question. To help with consistency, can you clarify where fidya can be donated, as a spreadsheet was blank on those cells?
Where fidya? That's a good question. Give me a second. Let me change all this. Fidya can be donated to where your zakat goes. Okay, I might add that actually. Anybody who accepts zakat is where fidya goes. The same as sadaqatul fitr as well. The same as your qurbani. If they can take zakat, then they can take that. That's just the simplest way of doing it. Good job. There we go. Now, so that is basically it done, but there is one tab, a really important tab that I've added in. And this is what makes this document really valuable, in addition to everything else. Use this tab for passwords, usernames, codes, etc. If you have a business, you have an authentication code with HMRC and with Companies House, put that in there. Because somebody wants to get into your business to try to deal with something, and it's a small business like mine. I've got the date hub, for example. I sell dates. That's a very sly plug for next Ramzan. Come and contact me, no problem, inshallah. I've got my authentication code in there. My wife tries to deal with it, and you'll say, what's the authentication code? If I don't have an accountant, might have it. Accountant will have it if he does my accounts properly. But if my accountant doesn't have it, and I did the accounts myself, she can't get access to the Companies House accounts. It's as simple as that. There will be a long process for her to eventually get that. But at the moment, she won't get access to that, especially if it's a limited company. If you have banks, etc., put your passwords in here. But that means you might completely dismiss what I'm saying right now, which is fine, because that makes this document super, super, super sensitive. It means you need to put it under lock and key and make sure nobody is able to access it whatsoever until after death. With this assets identifier, how do you do what do you do with it? Ideally, you print it out and then you keep it with your will and sign this as well. What I wouldn't dismiss though is if somebody has theirs updated digitally, I'm not saying this is legally binding. If somebody has theirs updated digitally, like I do here right now, and they just tell their family members and say, look, I haven't printed my assets identifier because it changes every week. So what I'm going to do is you can find it on my Dell laptop, on my desktop. That's where you can find it, for example. And then they can get access to it all. This just helps the executors. And then it also helps them, you know, when you apply for probate meaning I want permission as the executor to deal with the inheritance. When you apply for probate and they try to work out inheritance tax liability, it will ask you, how much was this person worth? Oh, they had a £300,000 house. Okay, what was the mortgage worth on it? 150. So they still owe 150. So it will say that person's value in their property is 150,000. If you have this document, you make applying for probate really easy for your executor. And that's all this is about. Make life easier for your family and your executors after you pass away. Otherwise, Allah forgive us, man. We create big, big problems. My son had this property, and my son promised me he had this, and my daughter said that she had this money. And then when you go and you look and you don't find it, you're like, what do you mean they didn't have anything? There's no record of them having anything. But he told me he had this, and my daughter said she had this, and my brother said he had this, and my sister-in-law's taking the properties, and you don't want any of that headache. Okay? Now, liabilities you can deduct. I've made note of that here. Non-deductible liabilities for inheritance tax purposes. Again, you can use this PowerPoint as a reference. Household bills, debts. It's really important to pay off your debts. Simple hadith. Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam, he refused to lead the janaza of a person who left behind debts without a way of paying them off. Okay? Oh. Do you understand what I've just said? Why isn't it doing my screen sharing? Molly Musa, what's going on here? I'm back on the slides and it's not showing up as the slides.
It's just on the Excel sheet.
Strange. I wonder why that is. Anyway, I'm going to tell you, even without the slides, right? If you have a debt, note it down. Have an IOU app on your phone if you want. Nabi Sallallahu refused to do the janazah of that person. Another Sahabi then stood up and said, no, you know what? I'll take care of that debt. Then Nabi Sallallahu said, okay, fine, right? Because you're taking care of it. Otherwise, Nabi Alayhi Salam was going to deprive that person from leading his janazah. And that is, imagine how stressful that is as a Sahabi. So we have to be very, very careful. Right, this has opened the wrong presentation. That's helpful, isn't it? Anyway. FAQs. Now, I'm going to give you... I've got some FAQs here. If my family are not Muslim, how do I ensure then write an Islamic will? Can I give more to a family member than the Islamic share? If they are inheritors, no. If they are non-inheritors, like let's say granddad is writing the will, his grandson doesn't inherit. His sons will, his grandsons won't, because the sons are still alive. It doesn't skip a generation. It will go to the next generation. So granddad, his son, meaning my dad, will inherit. But granddad might say, you know what, I want to send my son to Darul Uloom, my grandson to Darul Uloom. So I'm going to leave behind a will to say, yeah, you know what, from my 1/3, send my grandson Abdullah to Darul Uloom, and here's £20,000 for it, for example. You can do that, not a problem, because I'm not due to inherit as a grandson. Okay. Can I leave wasiyah for the spouse of an inheritor? This is proper slide. This is like the kind of things that is morally bankrupt, where my son, I can't leave him extra, right? Because Islam has set his share. Can I leave his wife extra? Because technically she's not my daughter. Yeah, I can. But if my intention by doing that is to make sure my son has a larger share, that's haram. You're not allowed to do that. It's a reprehensible behavior because you are deliberately going against what Sharia is telling you to do. The 1/3, 2/3 split is after. So that happens later. First, get rid of your funeral expenses, get rid of your debts, get rid of all of that, and then you've got the 1/3 and 2/3 left. If someone doesn't state an executor in their will, what would happen? You'd have to apply for letters of administration. And then there'll be a letter of wishes, which would basically be your will. But it's not an incomplete will. It's a will that doesn't have executors in it. So therefore, normally next of kin will write. It's a long process, so it can take 6 months, right? So please just write down executors, but take their permission, and executors can be women as well. But somebody asked me, and I said, if it's a woman with children and a husband, to be honest, I wouldn't actively recommend people become executors because it's so much hard work and it takes up hours and hours and hours, days, weeks of your life. So for a woman with children, with a husband, even with a job, where are you going to find the time for it? It's permissible. You can do it, absolutely. For men, it's difficult as well. For women who, make up for the work that their lazy husbands don't do, it's even more difficult. But yeah, Islamically, you can keep a female as an executor without an issue. Can the executor benefit from my inheritance? Meaning, can Moulana Ibrahim mention his son could be his executor? Yeah, they can. But if you're going to do that, they make your other son your executor as well. So your other son and your daughter aren't saying, oh, why is that son only the executor? What if he cheats, for example? So if you're going to do that, then balance it out. Make more than one executor from your family so that they can kind of make sure that nobody has too much power. Can I pay funeral expenses on behalf of my parents rather than it coming from their estate? Absolutely, you can. Does it have to be signed by a solicitor? If you use his basic will, which means under £500,000 ownership, my estate value is including my house, etc., then yeah, you don't need a solicitor. If you have £1 million as a couple and you have a property, so therefore you qualify £650,000 with a nil rate band and another 350 for the residence nil rate band, and you have £1 million tax exemption, then yeah, if it's under that, you don't need a solicitor. If it's more than that, and you have gone to a solicitor for help, you've spoken to Mufti Umar, for example, spoke to somebody at IWILS, for example, then yep, at that point, I'd say get it stamped by a solicitor. Or if you think the family dynamics mean there will be big fights here, get it signed because you don't want them to fight.
Mullah, can I just quickly jump in with one or two questions? Just popped in the WhatsApp group. Someone's asked, how often do we update the bank account part?
However often your bank account changes, right?
Okay.
What's your alternative? The alternative is you put an old bank account in. It has to be an up-to-date bank account, right? Otherwise, how are they going to know where your money is? You don't have to update exactly how much is in it. If it's digital, then yeah, you can update how much is in it. But otherwise, just tell them what is in the bank, what bank account details are.
Just another question. Does Islamic law require or encourage a person to disclose the contents of their will to their children or family during their lifetime? Have I asked that question already?
That's that question already.
Sorry, that's my fault.
You're hungry, man.
That's my fault. It's getting late in the day. There were a few other questions. One was related to home insurance and ISAs, and obviously that's a full thing in itself, so we don't have time for that. So someone said, what sort of personal items count as assets? Some books, clothes, etc. aren't worth a lot. Could you state in your will that your family should just give these items to a local library, charity shop, or do the items count as part of the wealth which your family are entitled to?
It is part of the wealth, but you can also say that. It is part of the wealth, but you can also donate charity. Like when my mum passed away, the most important thing to her sentimentally was her little Quran and her tasbih and her bansura. Now, more than anything else, the debate wasn't about her money, it was about her musalla. Do you get it? So those things we think have no value, they actually have loads of sentimental value. And because they have so much sentimental value, then you can make it clear in that I want to give my Quran to my eldest daughter and I want to give the musalla and my hijab to this. Yeah, you can do absolutely. Obviously, if it's within the 1/3, then it'll be sent out within that 1/3.
Jazakallah. Another question: what about the capital that your company puts on your behalf, which is a benefit? Can you take the capital too?
Yeah. Capital is not an issue unless it's earned haram way, obviously. The capital is never the issue. It's what it becomes. That additional part is the issue.
Another question: what if you have a death in service benefit from your work? This will be paid to my spouse if I die whilst in work. I don't pay for this benefit. Can she keep this payment?
That's a really good question.
Just to jump in on that. Sorry, go on. You mention it.
No, you do it first.
No, it's obviously
the host.
Hey, just in case I don't want to be.
Oh, do it.
No, actually, let me. I need to double check. I need to double check the information. Go on, you mention it.
I was gonna say I don't know. So now you're stuck.
As far as I'm aware, so this is a scenario that happened with my brother, who passed away from cancer last year, early January, and obviously he worked in the civil service, and there was a death in service benefit from his work that was paid directly to his wife. As far as I'm aware, and I might be wrong on this, and we consulted a mufti at the time, that payment goes directly towards the person whose name is on the form, because again, it's a benefit. It's not something that my brother actually earned. It's a benefit that was given to his by his work. So as far as I'm aware, that doesn't need to be distributed or divided evenly between trustees, etc.
MashaAllah. Moulana Musa, you should have done this presentation. Very
No,
good
no, no,
answer.
no. I'm an amateur compared to you, Moulana.
Is that similar to a question of compensation after death? If there's no acceptance of liability and there's no qadi to say you must pay this money because I hold you liable for their death, and it's compensation given to support the family and it's given for the survivors of the family, then that isn't counted in the same ruling as diyat. I know there's a fatwa going around that it's diyat, but I spoke to a few muftis after that, and it's very difficult to justify that that is in the same ruling as diyat, because diyat, blood money basically, is when there's a confession or there's an acceptance of fault. But this isn't a case like with the Air India crash, for example. They'll say we are not liable, and this is not an acceptance of liability. Now, if they're saying they're not liable, how can it possibly be blood money? So that's quite similar in the sense that it will go to the survivors who they say should get it, next of kin, etc. Any other important questions? I've got a minute left until Adhan here. Oh, there's a good question here. What if what if the dead person's deceased's debts are so great, there's nothing left for the family? The simple answer to that is tough luck. That is a really sad situation. It's really unfortunate, but those people deserve it. Anyway, I have to head off for Salah now. Jazakumullah khair for coming. If you have any questions, speak to Moulana Musa, and he'll pass them on to me. And speak to Mufti Umair as well, inshallah. His details are there. He'll be able to support you in whatever way you can.
Just a
Jazakumullah.
big Jazakumullah khairan to Moulana Abdullah for taking the time out. Honestly, it's been absolutely amazing. Inshallah, we'll have to get you on for more courses. Moulana Abdullah has to go lead Salah. That's why he's taking extra time and he's sat upstairs in the masjid. So alhamdulillah, he can just go downstairs. But Jazakallah khair, Moulana Abdullah, for your time. If anyone has any further questions, I have temporarily opened the group chat, which I will be closing very soon. Please do send in as many questions as possible. We want to keep Moulana Abdullah as busy as possible, inshallah. And two, please keep us in your du'as. Just a few things just to mention, inshallah. We had a question today actually by one of the participants, and said that it would be beneficial if we could organize what one should do when someone dies in terms of the legalities, in terms of the forms, in terms of from an Islamic perspective. So inshallah, we are looking at delivering a session on the 9th and 10th of September. It will be a two-part workshop delivered by Maulana Ibrahim Noor, who has a comprehensive presentation regarding this, inshallah, and it's called kind of the funeral rites. We are also looking at potentially delivering a session regarding the actual inheritance and how it's divided amongst the family, etc., inshallah. And last of all, we have a serial course which is starting, a 2-year serial course which is once per week, and it is starting in the beginning of September, inshallah. It's affordable for all learners, so do please keep an eye on. Inshallah, just keep us all in your du'as, and also please do leave us a review on Google Reviews, inshallah. It'll be really beneficial for our small academy to grow and to allow us to help as many people as possible, inshallah. Okay, Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.